The two civilizations. Dear families, the question of responsible fatherhood and motherhood is an integral part of the civilization of love, which I now wish to discuss with you. From what has already been said, it is clear that the family is fundamental to what Pope Paul VI called the civilization of love, an expression which has entered the teaching of the Church and by now has become familiar. Today it is difficult to imagine a statement by the Church, or about the Church, which does not mention the civilization of love. The phrase is linked to the tradition of the domestic church in early Christianity, but it has a particular significance for the present time. Etymologically, the word civilization is derived from civis, citizen, and it emphasizes the civic or political dimension of the life of every individual. But the most profound meaning of the term civilization is not merely political, but rather pertains to human culture. Civilization belongs to human history because it answers man's spiritual and moral needs. Created in the image and likeness of God, man has received the world from the hands of the Creator, together with the task of shaping it in his own image and likeness. The fulfillment of this task gives rise to civilization, which in the final analysis is nothing else than the humanization of the world. In a certain sense, civilization means the same thing as culture. And so one could also speak of the culture of love, even though it is preferable to keep to the now familiar expression. The civilization of love, in its current meaning, is inspired by the words of the conciliar constitution Gaudium et Spes. Christ fully discloses man to himself and unfolds his noble calling. And so we can say that the civilization of love originates in the revelation of the God who is love, as John writes, 1 John 4 verses 8 and 16. It is effectively described by Paul in the hymn of charity found in his first letter to the Corinthians, 13:1-13. This civilization is intimately linked to the love poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit which has been given to us, Rom 5:5, and it grows as a result of the constant cultivation. Which the gospel allegory of the vine and the branches describes in such a direct way, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vinedresser. Every branch of mine that bears no fruit, he takes away, and every branch that does bear fruit he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. John 15 verses 1-2. In the light of these and other texts of the New Testament, it is possible to understand what is meant by the civilization of love, and why the family is organically linked to this civilization. If the first way of the Church is the family, it should also be said that the civilization of love is also the way of the Church, which journeys through the world and summons families to this way. It summons also other social, national and international institutions, because of families and through families. The family in fact depends for several reasons on the civilization of love, and finds therein the reasons for its existence as family. And at the same time the family is the center and the heart of the civilization of love. Yet there is no true love without an awareness that God is love, and that man is the only creature on earth which God has called into existence, for its own sake. Created in the image and likeness of God, man cannot fully find himself except through the sincere gift of self. Without such a concept of man, of the person and the communion of persons, in the family, there can be no civilization of love. Similarly, without the civilization of love it is impossible to have such a concept of person and of the communion of persons. The family constitutes the fundamental cell of society. But Christ, the vine from which the branches draw nourishment, is needed so that this cell will not be exposed to the threat of a kind of cultural uprooting which can come both from within and from without. Indeed, although there is on the one hand the civilization of love, there continues to exist on the other hand the possibility of a destructive anti-civilization. As so many present trends and situations confirm. Who can deny that our age is one marked by a great crisis, which appears above all as a profound crisis of truth? A crisis of truth means, in the first place, a crisis of concepts. Do the words love, freedom, sincere gift, and even person and rights of the person really convey their essential meaning? This is why the encyclical on the splendor of truth, Veritatis Splendor, has proved so meaningful and important for the Church and for the world, especially in the West. Only if the truth about freedom and the communion of persons in marriage and in the family can regain its splendor, will the building of the civilization of love truly begin, and will it then be possible to speak concretely, as the Council did, about promoting the dignity of marriage and the family. Why is the splendor of truth so important? First of all, by way of contrast, the development of contemporary civilization is linked to a scientific and technological progress which is often achieved in a one-sided way, and thus appears purely positivistic. Positivism, as we know, results in agnosticism in theory and utilitarianism in practice and in ethics. In our own day, history is in a way repeating itself. Utilitarianism is a civilization of production and of use, a civilization of things, and not of persons, a civilization in which persons are used in the same way as things are used. In the context of a civilization of use, woman can become an object for man, children a hindrance to parents, the family an institution obstructing the freedom of its members. To be convinced that this is the case, one need only look at certain sexual education programs introduced into the schools, often notwithstanding the disagreement and even the protests of many parents, or pro-abortion tendencies, which vainly try to hide behind the so-called right to choose, pro-choice, on the part of both spouses, and in particular on the part of the woman. These are only two examples, many more could be mentioned. It is evident that in this sort of a cultural situation the family cannot fail to feel threatened, since it is endangered at its very foundations. Everything contrary to the civilization of love is contrary to the whole truth about man and becomes a threat to him. It does not allow him to find himself and to feel secure, as spouse, parent, or child. So-called safe sex, which is touted by the civilization of technology, is actually, in view of the overall requirements of the person, radically not safe. Indeed, it is extremely dangerous. It endangers both the person and the family. And what is this danger? It is the loss of the truth about one's own self and about the family, together with the risk of a loss of freedom and consequently of a loss of love itself. You will know the truth, Jesus says, and the truth will make you free, John 8 verse 32. The truth, and only the truth, will prepare you for a love which can be called fairest love, cf. Sir 2400 hours 24, vulgar. The contemporary family, like families in every age, is searching for fairest love. A love which is not fairest, but reduced only to the satisfaction of concupiscence, cf 1 John 2 verse 16, or to a man's and a woman's mutual use of each other, makes persons slaves to their weaknesses. Do not certain modern, cultural agendas lead to this enslavement? There are agendas which play on man's weaknesses, and thus make him increasingly weak and defenseless. The civilization of love evokes joy, among other things, for the fact that a man has come into the world, cf John 16 verse 21, and consequently because spouses have become parents. The civilization of love means, rejoicing in the right, cf 1 Cor 13:6. But a civilization inspired by a consumerist, anti-birth mentality is not and cannot ever be a civilization of love. If the family is so important for the civilization of love, it is because of the particular closeness and intensity of the bonds which come to be between persons and generations within the family. However, the family remains vulnerable and can easily fall prey to dangers which weaken it or actually destroy its unity and stability. As a result of these dangers, families cease to be witnesses of the civilization of love and can even become a negation of it, a kind of countersign. A broken family can, for its part, consolidate a specific form of anti-civilization, destroying love in its various expressions, with inevitable consequences for the whole of life in society. Love is demanding. 14. The love which the Apostle Paul celebrates in the first letter to the Corinthians, the love which is patient and kind, and endures all things, 1 Cor 13:4, 7, is certainly a demanding love. But this is precisely the source of its beauty. By the very fact that it is demanding, it builds up the true good of man and allows it to radiate to others. The good, says St. Thomas, is by its nature diffusive. Love is true when it creates the good of persons and of communities, it creates that good and gives it to others. Only the one who is able to be demanding with himself in the name of love can also demand love from others. Love is demanding. It makes demands in all human situations. It is even more demanding in the case of those who are open to the gospel. Is this not what Christ proclaims in his commandment? Nowadays people need to rediscover this demanding love, for it is the truly firm foundation of the family, a foundation able to endure all things. According to the apostle, love is not able to endure all things if it yields to jealousies, or if it is boastful, arrogant or rude, cf. 1 Cor 13:5-6. True love, St. Paul teaches, is different. Love believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things, 1 Cor 13:7. This is the very love which endures all things. At work within it is the power and strength of God himself, who is love, 1 John 4 verses 8 and 16. At work within it is also the power and strength of Christ, the Redeemer of man and Savior of the world. Meditating on the 13th chapter of the first letter of Paul to the Corinthians, we set out on a path which leads us to understand quickly and clearly the full truth about the civilization of love. No other biblical text expresses this truth so simply and so profoundly as the hymn to love. The dangers faced by love are also dangers for the civilization of love, because they promote everything capable of effectively opposing it. Here one thinks first of all of selfishness, not only the selfishness of individuals, but also of couples or, even more broadly, of social selfishness, that for example of a class or nation, nationalism. Selfishness in all its forms is directly and radically opposed to the civilization of love. But is love to be defined simply as anti-selfishness? This would be a very impoverished and ultimately a purely negative definition, even though it is true that different forms of selfishness must be overcome in order to realize love and the civilization of love. It would be more correct to speak of altruism, which is the opposite of selfishness. But far richer and more complete is the concept of love illustrated by St. Paul. The hymn to love in the first letter to the Corinthians remains the Magna Carta of the civilization of love. In this concept, what is important is not so much individual actions, whether selfish or altruistic, so much as the radical acceptance of the understanding of man as a person who finds himself by making a sincere gift of self. A gift is, obviously, for others, this is the most important dimension of the civilization of love. We thus come to the very heart of the gospel truth about freedom. The person realizes himself by the exercise of freedom in truth. Freedom cannot be understood as a license to do absolutely anything, it means a gift of self. Even more, it means an interior discipline of the gift. The idea of gift contains not only the free initiative of the subject, but also the aspect of duty. All this is made real in the communion of persons. We find ourselves again at the very heart of each family. Continuing this line of thought, we also come upon the antithesis between individualism and personalism. Love, the civilization of love, is bound up with personalism. Why with personalism? And why does individualism threaten the civilization of love? We find a key to answering this in the Council's expression, a sincere gift. Individualism presupposes a use of freedom in which the subject does what he wants, in which he himself is the one to establish the truth of whatever he finds pleasing or useful. He does not tolerate the fact that someone else wants or demands something from him in the name of an objective truth. He does not want to give to another on the basis of truth, he does not want to become a sincere gift. Individualism thus remains egocentric and selfish. The real antithesis between individualism and personalism emerges not only on the level of theory, but even more on that of ethos. The ethos of personalism is altruistic, it moves the person to become a gift for others and to discover joy in giving himself. This is the joy about which Christ speaks, cf. John 15 verse 11, 16 20, 22. What is needed then is for human societies, and the families who live within them, often in a context of struggle between the civilization of love and its opposites, to seek their solid foundation in a correct vision of man and of everything which determines the full realization of his humanity. Opposed to the civilization of love is certainly the phenomenon of so-called free love. This is particularly dangerous because it is usually suggested as a way of following one's real feelings, but it is in fact destructive of love. How many families have been ruined because of free love? To follow in every instance a real, emotional impulse by invoking a love liberated from all conditionings means nothing more than to make the individual a slave to those human instincts which St. Thomas calls passions of the soul. Free love exploits human weaknesses, it gives them a certain veneer of respectability with the help of seduction and the blessing of public opinion. In this way there is an attempt to soothe consciences by creating a moral alibi. But not all of the consequences are taken into consideration, especially when the ones who end up paying are, apart from the other spouse, the children, deprived of a father or mother and condemned to be in fact orphans of living parents. As we know, at the foundation of ethical utilitarianism there is the continual quest for maximum happiness. But this is a utilitarian happiness, seen only as pleasure, as immediate gratification for the exclusive benefit of the individual, apart from or opposed to the objective demands of the true good. The program of utilitarianism, based on an individualistic understanding of freedom without responsibilities, is the opposite of love, even as an expression of human civilization considered as a whole. When this concept of freedom is embraced by society, and quickly allies itself with varied forms of human weakness, it soon proves a systematic and permanent threat to the family. In this regard, one could mention many dire consequences, which can be statistically verified, even though a great number of them are hidden in the hearts of men and women like painful, fresh wounds. The love of spouses and parents has the capacity to cure these kinds of wounds, provided the dangers alluded to do not deprive it of its regenerative force, which is so beneficial and wholesome a thing for human communities. This capacity depends on the divine grace of forgiveness and reconciliation, which always ensures the spiritual energy to begin anew. For this very reason family members need to encounter Christ in the church through the wonderful sacrament of penance and reconciliation. In this context, we can realize how important prayer is with families and for families, in particular for those threatened by division. We need to pray that married couples will love their vocation, even when the road becomes difficult, or the paths become narrow, uphill and seemingly insuperable. We need to pray that, even then, they will be faithful to their covenant with God. The family is the way of the church. In this letter we wish both to profess and to proclaim this way, which leads to the kingdom of heaven, cf. 7:14, through conjugal and family life. It is important that the communion of persons in the family should become a preparation for the communion of saints. This is why the church both believes and proclaims the love which endures all things, 1 Cor 13:7, with St. Paul she sees in it the greatest virtue of all, cf. 1 Cor 13:13. The apostle puts no limits on anyone. Everyone is called to love, including spouses and families. In the church everyone is called equally to perfect holiness, cf. 5:48. The fourth commandment